Next, we therefore have the historical review. For the historical review section, the idea is still to start with an introduction sentence to set the scene. For example, maybe something to indicate that since the development of the World Wide Web, the Internet has become increasingly popular, with more and more people having access from home. The large increases in the numbers of Internet users during the last decade have had a significant impact on business, with many online opportunities in the areas of advertising and retail. This could be followed by some type of comment more specific to the report focus for this section, such as, recent reports have indicated that in the US alone, online advertising revenue reached $26 billion in 2010. This result suggests the importance of understanding what contribution online advertising is making, including understanding how revenue has grown over the last decade. As well, it also suggests that an investigation of the relationship, if any, to increases in levels of Internet users may provide useful insight. Mention the specific data being used, and then you are ready to show a chart and discuss the trends. At this point, you are therefore ready to refer to Figure 1, in which you would display these yearly figures in a format appropriate for time series data. After the chart, you would continue your discussion by examining the specific features, as well as then linking those features to real life. Please keep in mind that the presentation of the data into a chart is therefore only the first part of this section. You have to be able to communicate the features as well as interpreting them in relation to real life. Presenting the data is not sufficient for this report. Analysis and interpretation must also be included. Following the historical section, we can then think about whether the Internet is still expanding in terms of new users, and if so, by how much. And so this leads us to our review of new Internet users for 2010. And this will be done at a global scale. This will be quite a large component of the report, as you will need to firstly consider the distribution of new users in isolation, which is one variable analysis. You will then need to consider what factors may influence these levels, and so this means several bivariate relationships must also be analysed. Since this is a large section, it is nice to have a couple of sentences before the first subsection, maybe just to set the scene and refocus the reader, such as, we know that in recent years the Internet has continued to grow and that there are now more users of the Internet than ever before. But this raises an interesting question of whether the growth in new Internet users is consistent at a global level or whether it varies from country to country. This could then be followed by a sentence to indicate the structure of the section, such as, in this section, the levels of new Internet users during 2010 across a sample of 160 countries will be investigated, and as well, the possible factors influencing these levels will also be explored. You are then ready to write subsection 4.1 and therefore focus on new Internet user levels. For each of the subsections, we will still need to follow the report writing conventions, and so a good template is start with an intro sentence to set the scene of what you are focusing on, then a chart or table. For section 4.1, for this component, you would specifically need to include a histogram to visually show the distribution of new Internet user levels around the world. Then the features, generally a good summary of the features for one variable analysis will include things like the average, lowest value, highest value, and shape. It's also useful sometimes to note the modal class and talk about, of course, any variation between countries. So how the levels of new Internet users vary. Are they the same for all countries? Are we seeing different levels of new users? From the features, we go on to talk about the interpretation and therefore the analysis. The features need to be put in context and linked to real life. Maybe make some initial suggestions as to why growth levels are not the same for every country. Maybe suggest why some are higher and some are lower, and you could use some specific examples. Maybe comment on implications to online business activities such as advertising. A good concluding sentence for this subsection is to have a lead-in to the next subsection. For example, something like, in the next section of the report, factors which may influence the levels, such as region and economic conditions, will be examined. Okay, so after your one variable analysis, you'll undertake several bivariate subsections. The same structure template can be used for each of the bivariate subsections. For the bivariate analysis, you are also looking to comment on which factors most strongly influence the levels of new internet users, and so this type of comment can be a good concluding sentence in each subsection. In relation to the conclusion itself, your final section will be a conclusion section. As conclusions should be drawn within each section and subsection of the report, the final conclusion section will only be fairly small and is really just an opportunity to quickly recap on the major findings so as to remind the reader what they should be taking away from the report. No recommendations are required, and so your conclusion should be in relation to the overall review and your key findings. The appendix. Well, after the conclusion, you will include your appendix. I mentioned earlier that you would need an outlier appendix. Generally, this is the only appendix that should appear in your report, as anything important, including tables and charts, should appear within the report itself. If you do find that you have something extra that you want to include as an appendix, that is okay, but please keep in mind that the report should be able to be read without looking to any appendices, and so it is vital that all of your findings and conclusions go inside the report itself. Now, please don't forget that once your technical report is complete, that you need to go back and write your executive summary. The idea is that the executive summary should provide enough information so that someone who did not want to read the whole technical report could read the executive summary and know all of the key findings. This is in relation to any key figures, but also with regard to the real-life interpretation of the data. Okay, well that's everything I need to say for the moment. Maybe create your Word document and start adding in a basic structure of headings, but then I would recommend going to the Excel file and thinking about the outlier analysis, as well as making a start on the historical analysis. The workshops will be a good opportunity to think more about the report tasks, and don't forget that consultation sessions can also be used to ask for help. Please feel free to bring along your Excel file if you have questions, and we also have the special Excel sessions in a computer lab with 2 tutors working at each of those to help with individual queries.